games or talking about video games and a new gaming industry called blockchain gaming. For a lot of people that have heard of Bitcoin,
You hear that? I'm munching, bro.
if you walk in front of anywho, stop them. That's face, but we're here to have some fun.
Wait.
Oh, where'd he go?
Did he disappear? I was like, what's happening? He's cutting it
What
in.
happened?
Connection.
Yeah,
Oh,
something
you
inside of me.
for me.
I think he lost connection.
Well, what are you
Yeah,
gonna
he must
do?
have lost connection.
Oh, he's back.
All right, I'm back. That was weird. Sorry about that. Anywho, we're going to start talking some more about blockchain gaming, this new industry that's taken over. I'm really obsessed with it and can't wait to see where it goes. So with that, let me go ahead and introduce my guest for the night. His name is Christian, and I'm going to let him talk a little bit about what he's doing, and we'll have a great conversation in a minute. Go ahead.
Hey guys, yeah, my name's Christian, and I recently co-founded a startup which is doing Bitcoin gaming. It's pretty new, but we're making some new types of games that you can only do with things like Bitcoin.
And for people that are new here and may have heard of Bitcoin but don't know what it is, a lot of people know it as like internet money. And with this new form of, it's not just money, it's a technology. Hey buddy, do me a favor, you're on camera. There's a camera right behind you. Thank you. So with this new form of internet money, it's a technology that you can be able to do a lot more than just a transaction for money. You can do a transaction for data. So data, like I like to give the example, a skin from Fortnite. Different assets, things that you value digitally, can be measured utilizing Bitcoin and blockchain technology. So let's tell them a little bit more about what's the purpose for mixing Bitcoin and blockchain technology into gaming.
Yeah, well, actually, I've been around in, I guess, Bitcoin or blockchain gaming since 2014. I think really since it first started. So I've kind of done Bitcoin and gaming as money. I've also used the blockchain to do game items and tokens in gaming. I think some red guys in front of the camera. Champ.
Not anymore.
Yeah. I guess there's two kind of aspects. One is that games are quite restrictive. Like if you play normal games, say it's Christmas and you play Monopoly with your friends. It's something that I used to do as a kid. As we play Monopoly, we kind of like trade pocket money as we played, or we'd use like candy as money, and we could just like send it between players. And in the digital world, you can't really do that. All your money is kind of controlled by the game developers, and you don't have much freedom. You can't send it outside of the game. And the same with game items. If you have a game item in a game, that's kind of locked into that game. So if that game closes down or restricts you, you lose all of your value. So with Bitcoin and the technology behind Bitcoin blockchain, you can kind of liberate ownership in games. So you can earn money in a game, and that money you can spend in the real world. You can take it to a shop and buy some coffee, or you can use it in a different game. That's kind
Absolutely.
of
It sounded like we had a question.
I do
Go
have
ahead.
a question. So you're saying like if I buy a skin for like Fortnite and Caleb can take it or sell it instead of having it and not be able to do anything with it after I'm done?
Yes and no. So I think it's important not to kind of exaggerate it too much. So I actually made a game which did this. It was using something called Counterparty, which was like a Bitcoin kind of token mechanism. Anyway, there was a game that came out called Spells of Genesis, and they had cards. It's like Magic the Gathering, and all those cards were stored on the blockchain, and you could have like a token that represented that card. But it didn't exist in the game's database. You actually had it in your wallet. And I saw that game, and that game was kind of popular, and I wanted to attract all those users to play my game. So I said, in my game, which had nothing to do with that game, if you have this dragon card and you play my game, that dragon card will represent, in my game, it represented a real dragon. It's like a pet monster that you could have. So kind of games have to kind of allow the incorporation of other games, game items. I guess you can kind of see it as like an open game database. You can store your game items on this open database, and other games can use it if they want to. But then again, it's not guaranteed. If I make a game that's not popular, and you get like a token, like a game item in my game, if my game's not popular, no other game might accept that token. So it's not like 100%, but it's definitely an improvement. And I think it's a quite interesting concept.
That's
I
interesting.
agree. It is an interesting concept to be able to have something that you either pay for or earn in one game, and then be able to have the option to either sell it and or take it with you to another game. And what I also think is fascinating with some platforms, they're allowing you to be able to track the data from what's going on with that asset that you bought in one game. So, for example, let's say I earn a gun in Call of Duty Warzone, and I want to keep track of the stats of that game. You would then be able to follow that gun, the amount of kills you got with it, the amount of bullets it's fired, the amount of hours that you've used it, all of that, all of the different games you brought it with you to, all of that information can be tracked, and you can learn more about yourself essentially, as well as how good that user was with that weapon. You know, if you ever see somebody that just has so top of the leaderboard scores, but you can't tell if it's that they've played the game a lot or just that they're really good at the game and have gotten that high. You know what I mean? There's so much that you can learn once you have access to more data for all of the assets inside of the games that we play. So let's tell them a little bit more about what's going on in this industry. You brought up, you got into blockchain and gaming in 2014. I know that that's really when this whole revolution started. I'll get to your question in a minute, buddy. Hold on to that for a second. So I want more people to know where did this all begin, and where did blockchain gaming go from when it started in 2014?
Well, it's quite a long history, but I guess I kind of started 2014, maybe at the end of 2013. And the first thing we did, we basically it was quite simple. I added Bitcoin into games, so people would play a game and they could actually earn Bitcoin, so they could earn money by playing a game. And that kind of, just made games a little bit more interesting. You've got a bit more invested, because instead of getting like fake Mario coins that had no money, it wasn't a lot of money, but you could earn some real money. So I had a lot of like people in third world countries, like or India, maybe that's a second world country, I don't know. But people were playing the game and like earning pocket money from it, and And
how many people want to make money while playing a video game?
$50 a month or something.
Who doesn't?
And that's where I kind of started. And then I started to kind of explore a little bit more
Right?
and
Who
realize that
doesn't?
you don't have to do just Bitcoin. You can actually use Bitcoin to represent a game item. So instead of just sending a player money, you could actually send them like a token that represents a game item. And then I've kind of gone back to just using Bitcoin at the moment. The reason is I think game items and tokens are quite interesting, but I think it's quite a big challenge on a technical level, and also it's quite complex. So at the moment, I'm kind of interested in just trying to walk before I can run, and just making simple games that kind of enhance the game.
I hear that. We can definitely touch on that more. I want to answer SoCal's question real quick, and then I think we had another question in the back. Go ahead, buddy.
Okay, so speaking of like blockchain technologies, are there like any difficulties that you have experienced with like inefficiencies of blockchain? I mean, assumingly that technology is going to get better, and we're going to have like, more processing power. Like, in its current stage that it is like right now, is there any actually like fully efficient blockchain technologies?
Yes, well, that's quite interesting. So, like, I've been doing this since 2013, and the thing that kind of slowed things down a lot was the scalability issue. So, blockchains, the key feature of blockchain is it's decentralized. No one central party controls it, and that's where it gets this kind of it can't be censored, and it gets its security from. The problem is that if you have millions and millions of transactions and billions, if you want to add game items, it's very difficult to keep that decentralized. So what generally happens is these blockchains get more expensive to use. You have transaction fees. And actually, a lot of my first games, I stopped them because the scalability technology wasn't there. However, on Bitcoin, there is a new scalability technology called the Lightning Network, which is kind of where Bitcoin's going at the moment. And that lets you send Bitcoin. That makes Bitcoin like an order of magnitude more scalable, whilst keeping, it has some security trade-offs, but I think like 90% the security is there. It's kind of designed for microtransactions. So on Bitcoin, it was very difficult to send a fraction of it, like to send a penny, or like in a game, you want to kind of stream money like a cent or a penny to somebody. That became unfeasible on Bitcoin. And I think all blockchains, because of just the scalability issue. But the Lightning Network allows you to stream money instantly. With regards to tokens,
And small amounts.
Yeah, small amounts. So that's kind of what I'm using in my games now, the Lightning Network, and that's only recently come out this last year. So I'm kind of rebuilding the games I made originally on Bitcoin for that. Tokens and the game items, I think that's an order of magnitude more difficult to scale. So I think it'll take a few more years until we see something that will let game developers really kind of unleash that potential. But definitely the scalability is like the main issue, but it'll get there. It's just blockchains need to be quite conservative by nature, because if you move too fast, you can break things and damage the security of the blockchain. So it's kind of coming along slowly, I think.
Slow and steady wins the race. It all depends on the way that you build the game. There's a lot of games that are in development right now, and I like that Lightning's there. It's kind of a overlay on top of the existing Bitcoin network. Thus, you're still going through the regular Bitcoin network. You can be able to do a lot smaller, faster transactions, kind of like when you're leveling up your XP in a game. But instead of leveling up XP in a game, you're leveling up, your Bitcoin wallet, or losing your Bitcoin wallet, if you like to relate to what Annalise and me talk about with Light Night. That's one game where, just like Fortnite, except every time you kill somebody, you earn money. But also at the same time, every time you die, you lose money. So some people are really excited for a game like that, like I am, because I'm ready to shoot a lot of people and earn a lot of Satoshis. That's a small amount of Bitcoin for you people that don't understand. But yeah, it's a growing market. There's a lot of ways that you can be able to earn money while playing these games. Anybody else have any other questions? Awesome. Well, it was a pleasure. Well, no, before we even go, I want to definitely talk more about what's your project now, and what's the forecast? What's your roadmap? What do you guys plan to do?
Yeah, it broke up a little bit there, but I think you're asking what projects you're working on now. Yeah, so I actually so I kind of have like two companies. One is my original company, Mandelduck, and that's basically my kind of indie game development name. But the company I co-founded now is called Zebedee, and we are like making kind of tools for game developers to build games with Bitcoin and the Lightning Network. Zebedee itself doesn't make games; it makes tools for game developers to make games. However, we are making some sample games, and we're having an event on May the 3rd, which is like it's a kind of an online esports Bitcoin event. It also be in Altspace VR, so please join that. It's called MintGox. Go to Mint, it's MINT Gox, GOX.com. And that's going to be, that's where we're going to showcase some of the sample games and some of the things that you can do with Lightning and Bitcoin that you couldn't do in gaming. So one thing we're doing is we're having like a Street Fighter battle. It's going to be online with players who are fighting, like it's like Street Fighter, a fighting game. But we've added the ability for the audience who are watching this game on the Twitch or Mixer stream. They can kind of send money. They can stream Bitcoin into the game, and that the Bitcoin they stream into the game kind of interacts with the game. So, for example, they might send like a few cents or $1 to display a message in the game, or they can. What we've actually done here is if they send a message into the game, it kind of it charges up a gauge, and after enough people have sent messages by paying some small amounts of Bitcoin, it drops a bomb into the game, which kind of blows up the players and damages their health. And then at the end of the game, based on we have some sponsors who have donated some money, and based on the money that people have paid into the game then sends money back out to the players. So it's kind of the players can stream money into the game, and the game can stream money out of the game back to the players. So this is like money from sponsors. That's the kind of things we experiment. I kind of like this idea of you no longer just have to watch an esports game. You can actually interact with it and also kind of get
Like, how
money
did
from
you
it, kind of
make
breaking that fourth wall. So that's kind of what we're working on at the moment.
Well, you learn it. It's from interacting with executives, right? Yes.
Anybody, we're doing a live stream right now. Just bear with us for a little bit longer.
I love
All right,
leaders think
so
that reason, too.
that's fascinating, and I love what you guys are doing and how you're integrating the technology into the game. So you said that you're doing 2 projects. I love what Zebedee is doing, but tell us more about your game. What exactly is your focus with your game?
It's really rebuilding the games I originally made back in 2014 on Bitcoin. So I made these 2 games that were kind of popular in the Bitcoin world. But due to the scaling issue, they couldn't really continue. But now with the Lightning Network, I'm bringing them back. I'll just quickly talk about them. One game is a simple kind of arcade style game where you tap a screen and you kind of build up speed with an 8-bit monkey, and then he flies through the air, and the aim of the game is to make him fly as far as possible. And that game basically rewards you with Bitcoin. Kind of how it works is that the game will show adverts and it has sponsors, and the more people play the game, the more ad revenue they make, and then I send some of that ad revenue back to the players. If I keep a percentage and the rest I give back to the players. It's kind of a fun, simple game. The second game I'm bringing back is, I guess the easiest way to explain it is like Pokemon Go. It's like I had this. It was called Takara, and anybody could drop Bitcoin anywhere around the world. And then people would open up the app and they could see, oh, someone's dropped some Bitcoin down this street. So they would go and pick it up. And how that kind of worked when I released it is that a lot of companies would drop Bitcoin for marketing. So there's a few companies, I had a few in Japan cool. where they wanted to kind of do a marketing campaign, and it was very cheap. All they had to do was get a few $1,000s of Bitcoin, and they could just drop all this Bitcoin around Japan. And when people would go and pick it up, they'd obviously see the company advert or sponsor or whatever they wanted. They'd have to answer a question or solve a puzzle or something, just some sort of challenge, and then they'd kind of pick up some Bitcoin. So that's another game I want to kind of bring back. But I'm kind of working with. Yeah, it's a shame they were quite popular, especially I had bars and restaurants would drop Bitcoin in their bar, so people would have to come inside the bar to kind of pick it up,
so
and then
genius.
it's gotten
Oh my
through.
gosh.
Yeah. It actually came about. I was actually drunk at a party, and do you know when you're drunk? Do you know when you're drunk and sometimes you think you see coins on the floor, but it's just a bit of paper? Maybe that's just me, but I had that. I thought I saw some money on the floor, and then I kind of thought, oh, wouldn't it be cool if I could just drop some Bitcoin here for somebody to pick up? And people were doing this before with paper wallets, so people would write down a Bitcoin password or passphrase, and they would geocache it around the world, and you have to go and find these physical bits of paper. But I just kind of made a digital version of that.
I think you just gave me another idea for something I could do in this world. Geocaching, and you gotta we were talking about different things you can do in alt space for games, and one person said hide and seek, another person said an obstacle course. Geocaching might be another really great one. Everybody gets a website that you can go to, and hidden all around this world will be all sorts of objects that you got to go and find. It'd be really good if I can hide some NFTs and stuff like that, and you got to go find them. That'd be really cool. I definitely want to figure out how I can get that done. But thanks for the idea. I love.
I can help you on that, actually.
Let's work on that. I love all the different projects and the ideas that you got going, and I can't wait to see what you guys announce at Mint Gox. What day is that?
May the 3rd. We're doing it every month. So the second one is just May the 3rd. So if you just, I'm sure there'll be a link in the YouTube or whatever description, but it's Mintgox, MINTGOX.com. Yeah, if you go to the website, it has all the information. so you'll be able to get some free Bitcoin if you go there. And yeah, we got some games that that you can play in a web browser, and also you can watch this kind of Street Fighter esports event we're doing and kind of interact with the game there with Bitcoin as well.
And then let's tell them one more time, what's your company's website?
The company is Zebedee.io. So Zebedee is Zebedee. Zebedee.io. Or in America, they call it ZBD or something. Because
Yep, I definitely would have pronounced it ZBD.
Z's is
And
Z,
then one last time, how can the people get in contact with you?
on Twitter, I'm Mandelduck. So
Mandel Duck.
M-A-N.
Oh, like your username.
Yeah, Mandelduck on Twitter. MEDEL Duck.
Cool.
It's Mandel
cool.
as in Mandelbrot, if anybody knows that.
Interesting.
But,
No.
oh, it's like those funky swirly patterns.
Wow.
It's like a funky mathematical pattern that repeats for infinity. It's called a Mandelbrot. You've probably seen them on like GIFs and stuff. You'll know when you see it.
That's possible. All right, guys, give it a hand for Christian. Awesome. And then, does anybody else have any questions? Yeah, emojis. I shouldn't say giving a hand. Emojis are welcome. Everybody, show your emojis. It's not like you can really clap because not everybody here has hands. But does anybody have any questions before we end the interview? Ask now, forever hold your peace. All right, we got 2 hands up. Go ahead, ask away. You can unmute yourself.
Yeah, I have a question about basically transactions in the blockchain system for the game. Who are the 2 ends of this transaction? Let's say it can be between 2 players or between the sponsors of the games and the players. If there is no limitation for that.
Yeah, so generally it's kind of from player to player. It depends how the game developer makes the game. The game developer can make it in such a way the transaction can go from player to game developer to player. And that's probably useful if the game developer wants to take a percentage of the transaction, for example. Or the game developer can let it go straight from player to player.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's kind of up to how you want to do it, really. Yeah, I think generally, the good thing with Bitcoin is that game developers can take such a small amount. So, for example, I kind of like the idea where the transaction goes from player to player, but the game developer just takes like a tiny amount, like 1 cent or 2 cents, something the player wouldn't notice.
Yeah.
And that way, if the game gets like thousands or millions of transactions, they can earn some money without necessarily taking something like 30%, which is what like Apple do on apps. They take 30% of developers or something like that.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Any other questions? Us? Go ahead, SoCal.
Trying to figure out a way to phrase this actually. So being that you're doing like live games, do you run into issues as far as like scalability with cost for live streaming that counterbalance the actual like how do you say it, the investments made by the players playing the game?
Yeah, sorry, I think I'll get the question. I broke up. You said the cost of live streaming? Or?
Correct. Being so like you're doing if your games are like live streaming, do you run into issues as far as like cost and scalability, versus people actually contributing in Bitcoin to play the game? And if that's the case, does it affect like the monetization? Because like let's say you take like 30% of the Bitcoin, but then to actually stream it, does it cost like 30 or 40%, or what's the average for that? Out of curiosity.
Before you answer this question, guys, let me just remind you, we're still streaming. There's a camera right here. Do me a favor and don't walk in front of the camera. It's all good, buddy. You're good. Continue, please. Answers.
Yes.
Great question.
Yeah, so like kind of streaming, as in like streaming the video of the game, costs nothing. But I guess what you're asking is that in order to kind of pay the audience who are watching the game money, that money kind of needs to come from what's the word? It needs to come from it needs to come from somewhere, right? It kind of because what we do at the moment. So there's kind of 2 ways to do it. One is we actually have sponsors. We've got a few companies who are sponsoring these events. So we actually have in this game, the fighters are fighting in a US Steel C style arena, and in the arena we put like the logos of the company who have sponsored some money. So and also what we are doing, or what you can do, we're not doing it entirely just because we want to be careful with gambling laws, but you can also have, before the match starts, all the audience will actually place bets on who they think is going to win, and then the audience who chose correctly get the money, and obviously that money comes from the people who chose incorrectly, right? So that's a kind of a sustainable model. But obviously we do have to be careful, because if as a company, we have to make sure we're like following the gambling laws, and if we've got people coming from all around the world and playing, we've got to be careful that we don't kind of upset any local countries' kind of gambling laws. But that is a possible way to do it. That's what some of the developers we're working with are doing, something like that. They just, it can be a bit more complicated, because you have to make sure you don't have any players from like Saudi Arabia or somewhere like that, where gambling is strictly banned, or I think it's banned in the States as well, online gambling. So you got to be quite specific and have all these like click here to make sure you're not a citizen of the United States and all this kind of stuff. Of course, because it's a blockchain in the web, if you weren't a company, you could just put it on there and do it. But obviously we're a company, so we need to be careful. We're kind of obeying the laws. Yeah.
One quick thing.
Yeah.
So like if let's say if I were to build a game, where would you recommend like I host my game for like live streaming? Would you recommend like utilizing like AWS's like live streaming platform to host that content, or how would you go about it to decrease costs?
Yeah, well, what we do for the event to live stream the match is, so what I'm doing for the Mint Gox event is I made a game, and I send that game, like the executable, to the players who are going to play, and then I also have a copy of the game. And when they play each other, I'm kind of like inside that game as well, and I just stream from my home computer on my internet connection, and I just stream to like Twitch or Mixer. So I'm just hosting it on my own computer. Obviously, it depends on your internet connection. If you don't have a good internet connection, I think Amazon has something, Amazon Desktop, Amazon Workspace, where you can literally get like a Windows PC in the cloud that you can like remote desktop into, and you can kind of stream from there. I don't think it costs too much, because I think it's one of these things you pay for the usage. But I guess if another thing that we are using to host our games on is, we're using itch.io, which is a great place to host indie games. Yeah, I guess it kind of depends. So we're doing like these one-off events for the game, so we can just like run it on my computer. But I guess you're saying you kind of want a game that's always online on the cloud, right? So like
yeah. So
yeah.
we're discussing like kind of doing like a Twitch model ourselves and creating like an environment where people can play games. But the issue is, like AWS's model, like it's highly expensive. I think it's like for every 5,000 connections, it's like $400, and it's like, man, how do you get around that?
Yeah, well, I guess it kind of depends on your model. So obviously, if you want to run like large multiplayer, kind of like Fortnite, you've got to pay for server costs somewhere, right? Or you can just have your game, and I think it's going to cost money eventually, right? So you just have to make sure your game's business model pays for that, right? Pretty much, yeah.
Well, thank you.
Fantastic. Guys, give it up one more time for Christian from ZBD. Thank you so much for this interview.
No worries. Thanks for having me.
Virtual handshake.
Yeah.
Drop the controllers.
Oh, no, I think my controllers went flat.
Oh, good. Thanks so much for tuning in.
Cool.
actually promoting here? How do we get started?
In computer numbers than there actually exists in paper currency.
How do we get
Right.
started though? What's
How do
the
you
next step?
how do you get started?
Most people don't know
I mean,
What's
the
the
first
next
thing
step?
the first thing that you always want to do is honestly learn about what you're getting into. Like, I don't know if anybody does stocks or, real estate or any other types of investment, but Bitcoin right now is at its investment stage. You can use it
Mhm.
instead of using like USD. There's an app called Pay. Easiest way to get involved in cryptocurrency. There's an app called Pay, or if you have Cash App, you can buy Bitcoin on Cash App. And
Yeah,
you
I
can
got
send
Cash App.
Bitcoin between your friends and turn it into
Robinhood,
USD.
Robinhood
You can
too.
transfer it. Right. You can convert it over into USD. But there's this app
Mhm.
called Pay. PEI. It's on the App Store, and basically, anytime you ever use your debit card, it gives you SAT, which is the smallest conversion of Bitcoin. And eventually, like right now, I have I think $25 so far, just from buying things at the store, but with my card. It gives you points whenever you go to stores, and it gives you Bitcoin. Like it
Nice.
pays you to buy shit, basically. Does that make sense?
Sweet.
I'm sure
Yeah.
you've seen those, like where they give
Can
you
I
or,
offer
like,
you an opportunity
cashback.
to make money
That's
too?
essentially what it is.
I want to offer everyone here an opportunity. You can join my affiliate program, and I make EMF protective clothing, so like hoodies that are made with pure silver, joggers, this and that. But you get 10% of the sale. So if you sell a hoodie, you get $20. Like I have people making like $100 a day, like selling like 4 jackets,
You're
and they make
talking
like
about
$100.
protecting electronics for the EMF band, where
Yeah,
there's
against, like,
nuclear
5G.
explosion or whatever.
Yeah, against 5G and
If
whatnot.
there's a nuclear
Oh, I'm back.
explosion, don't worry
Okay.
about your electronics.
That was weird. And everyone's loading. Now I can see you guys. Apparently I died. Now I'm back.
Oh, there you go.
I have a question. If you guys can hear me.
I hear you.
But if you want to join the
What is
affiliate
happening?
program, you can go to nochoicestore.com and you go to terms and info. And in terms and info, you can hit, there's a affiliate program at the top, and then you can join there and start making money right now. Like every human on the planet basically needs like what I have, and I have shit for babies too. So it's pretty easy to sell once you break it down to them. You show them the symptoms, show them the effects of 5G and whatnot. And
There we
boom, we
go.
have the solution. Like we're providing protection. You'd rather pack the heat and not need it than need one and not have it. You know what I mean?
Do you guys know about XRP?
No.
What's XRP?
About what?
XRP?
No.
Yeah, so
Like it's,
XRP is trying to. Do you guys know anything about Norstro, Vorstro accounts and what is this? Swift. That's what it's called. Do you know how like banks transfer money to each other?
Hey, when are you guys buying in on Bitcoin though? Do you guys like tell everyone when you're gonna buy in and we all can
So
like go
I've
in
already
together
bought
on
in.
it?
A really good time to buy in was honestly when the stock market crashed, because Bitcoin dropped to $4,000. Right now, Bitcoin's almost at $8,000 again. So like, I don't want to say it's not late to buy in, because we're still like in very like early stages of the technology in general, and the more people that find out about it, the more it's going to be like bought and traded and whatever. But yeah, so I don't know. You just gotta watch. Honestly, Bitcoin, even though cryptocurrency it's like its own market, all the markets follow the stock market to an extent. So like if the stock market is gonna crash or if it's boosting, usually Bitcoin's on the same track. Sometimes it's opposite.
Is anybody
Right
here
now, it's
a good
opposite.
marketer? Do you have any good marketers in the room?
Something. Look for companies that have been around for a long time and are hurting big time. Talking about airlines, there's a whole industry of airlines that are hurting big time right now. The government is going to be bailing these companies out. They're going to be back on their feet when this thing's over, if it's over.
Oh yeah,
It
for
should be,
sure.
right? So,
I'm not trying to jump into the stock market until I see a positive. Right now we're way too negative.
You don't even understand.
You might want to
People are
reconsider
going to
because
fly.
the earnings calls are going to.
Oh yeah, I know, but as soon as they start opening things up, that's when people are gonna rush to the airport and start like traveling again. I just don't know when, because I mean, everything is everywhere right now. states are saying that they're staying closed. Some states say that they're opening. Some states are saying, you know, this, that, and the third. Until I see like some actual plan to actually open states, I'm not necessarily going to jump on anything, because everything is, even retailers are taking a shit right now in their stocks because they're having to price things higher because of the demand. You know, like you would think, hey, now's a good time to buy, but things are still going down. So I'm not trusting it just yet. When I see, hey, so-and-so state opens up, then I'm going to jump on that ball, because once states open up, all the other states are going to follow. You know what I mean? And then, right. And then there's going to be, you know, positive speculation that I'm going to jump onto. But like, I'm not jumping on the market just yet. Same thing with oil. I feel the same thing about all of them until I see that, you know, positive, because it can dump at any time. You know what I'm saying? So.
Well, we're coming up on the point of the earnings calls coming in early May.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
I think there's going to be a big divergence between companies, because some companies will do quite well, like Microsoft. They have the advantage, or Zoom. They have the technology company or biotech companies. They are safe from the COVID thing.
What retail is open right now? Walmart's open, Target's open. Those companies are still
retailers right now, kind of, the problem with the retailers right now is that they're starting to now. At the beginning, everyone is rushing to the store, trying to buy everything up. Now we're seeing a slowdown, is what I've been seeing. Yep. Right, everybody was rushing at first, and now because they're having trouble with supply and demand, some of the supply chains are not getting what they need. They're having to increase the price on some of the goods, and people don't like that. So what happened was the opposite. Their stocks were crashing last week because they're putting up the price of goods, and that upsets obviously their clientele, and some people may not just buy it in general. So that affected that. That's what's happening. Until I see like that change and like a few other things change, I'm not weary to jump on. If there's a housing crash, I'll jump on immediately. But like, you know, it's just I don't see a positive right now for retailers and things like that.
And housing seems to be staying firm right now. It doesn't seem to be crashing whatsoever, which is a really good sign.
It's low.
Yeah, I know. I was seeing that what store was it? I was literally listening to some podcast about like stocks and so they were saying that retailers were crashing. Some retailers.
I mean, they certainly should be. I'm just saying the stores that are open, the Walmarts and Targets, they're getting all the consumers. You have to buy groceries. You have to eat. There's only a few stores open that are, you know, nationwide that people are shopping at. And you're right. Some of the prices are going up, but still the people are getting in there and buying it because they don't have much choice. You know? So there's definitely things that are working out positive, and there's certainly a heck of a lot of stuff that's negative right now. And we certainly know that the government's throwing money around. They're throwing money at people who are out of work and stuff like that. And you know, it's a big mess. And how does it all shake out in the end? What are the positive things? What are the negative things? But we do see, whether you like Walmart or not, if you're hungry, you're gonna go there and get some groceries. You know, kind of thing. There's just not a lot of options.
Yeah.
Yeah, there is that. The fast food chains are going to do well. I mean, you don't have a lot of options. So they've got the drive-thrus, they're going to do well. McDonald's is going to make out like a bandit on this thing. Whether you like McDonald's or not, because the masses do. And that's what you follow. You follow the money.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah, I was fortunate to save a lot, like just saving up before all this started. So it's like I still have my job. I work in the tech industry, so it's like I'm still saving. Like I'm not like the stimulus check. I'm invested in that. Like that's not.
You're probably saving. You're like me. You're probably saving more than ever. First off, I'm not applying for a stimulus check. I'm not going anywhere. I'm staying home. I'm not going out to restaurants. I'm staying home. And I work in the tech industry too. I've been working from home for 5 years, and this is not really a big change as far as work goes. But the thing is, I'm not spending any money. You know, it's easy to take 35-40% of your paycheck and just stock it away and just whatever. I tried putting a new roof on my house because it's about that time due. So putting a new roof on the house and it's like whatever. It's only about $9,000.
The roof done. The roof done. Oh yeah, definitely.
Gotta get it
helps
done
to
before
plan
rainy
ahead.
season starts.
Oh yes, yeah. Oh yeah. We don't know how long this is going to take. Always good to plan ahead.
Eventually, this thing's gonna end, though. Hopefully.
I think the risk, though, is that it takes longer than people expect, and some companies might not survive and just run out of cash in the meantime. Especially smaller companies.
Laid off.
Certainly, as much as the government's going to try to spill out as far as cash goes, they're not going to be able to recover the loss that these companies are having. A lot of them will take the money and go bankrupt anyway, for sure.
And reopen as another company? No.
Here's the thing, though. Here's the really big thing. This has been like a wake-up call for the entire world who's been relying on China for the past 10, 20 years of